Let's put forward somebody who's actually a Democrat. Look, we shouldn't have to choose between one candidate who wants to burn this party down and another candidate who wants to buy this party out.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg.
This idea that he figured out it was a bad idea. He figured out it was a bad idea after we sent in monitors and said it must stop. Even then, he continued the policy.
You're literally in part of the committee that's overseeing these things, and we're not able to speak to literally the first thing about the politics of the country to ourselves.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize that
I made an
knowledge.
error. People sometimes forget names.
It was a circular firing squad if I ever saw one, but with their knives out for each other, did they miss an opportunity to strike at the ultimate target at the very moment in his presidency that he's most emboldened and seemingly rising in popularity? Some candidates thought so.
I think the main thing is that I wish we had been talking more about Donald Trump because these personal slugfests, I'm not sure they benefit anyone. And so my hope is that while debates are about contrast, that the next debate is a little bit more about him and what he's done and why we need to replace him.
The real winner in the debate last night was Donald Trump. Because I worry that we may very well be on the way to nominating somebody who cannot win in November.
Joining our conversation now from the Washington Post, national political reporter Robert Costa, with us at the table, political reporter for the New York Times, Nick Confessori, former aide to the George W. Bush White House and State Department, Elise Jordan, plus former top State Department official Rick Stengel. Bob Costa, the night that was particularly striking. I mean, we all saw the fireworks, and if people didn't watch it, they read about the clashes, most famously now probably the attacks on Mike Bloomberg from Elizabeth Warren. But the regrets expressed just minutes after they left the debate stage are something I've never seen before. Have you?
For many moderates in the party, last night was a disaster because they were hoping either Mayor Bloomberg would take control of the race or Mayor Buttigieg or Senator Klobuchar or Vice President Biden would take control of the message in that wing of the party. Instead, it remains scattered. It remains balkanized in the centrist wing of the Democratic Party. And Senator Sanders, when you look at national polling, continues to surge ahead. And ahead of Super Tuesday, when 14 states will vote, that puts a lot of top Democratic establishment types in a complicated position. Who is actually going to be their standard bearer in the long run?
So, let me just cue the Twitter folks online for Sanders. Get your fingers ready, because here I go. Some ugly truth. Sanders is a front runner, but so he's got, 27 in a national poll. 49% are split out among all of the moderates. So he's actually an incredibly weak frontrunner in terms of not actually having the support of a majority. And I say this as someone who still has PTSD and wakes up in the middle of the night with sweats over the 2016 Republican primary when the exact same thing happened. And I asked Jeb Bush when he sat in that chair or other Republicans, Chris Christie, was it a mistake to go after each other? Chris Christie killed Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz killed Jeb Bush. I mean, the same thing happened last night. Elizabeth Warren may have finished off Mike Bloomberg. Okay. Mayor Pete may have finished off Amy Klobuchar. Okay. But as Bob Costa just said, they strengthened Bernie, who a lot of people on both sides of the aisle think Trump can beat.
Look, we've seen this movie before. We saw it in 2016, and it ended with Trump as the nominee and now president. I didn't see anything on that stage last night that changed the basic tenor of this campaign, which is that Sanders is still a factional candidate, but he has the biggest faction. And no one else can cobble together a bigger one. Right. He's going to be the nominee unless something fundamental changes. And there are people on Twitter and elsewhere who enjoy watching Bloomberg getting beaten up, and he's got a trident sticking out of his chest right now. He's gotten beaten up so much. But the point is, it doesn't really matter because Sanders is ahead. And Warren was attacking the one guy she can't get voters from in the first place.
Yeah, that's so interesting, too. I mean, you know, I think it was about Bush that the term strategery was conjured up. But the strategery was puzzling to me, too. So Warren appears now to be out of the progressive lane and swerving into the moderate lane, trying to kill them off because Bernie's voters aren't available to her. Is that the thinking?
And you wonder, hey, Elizabeth Warren, maybe you could have noticed that there was this moderate lane back in the spring, summer. You had an opportunity to, you know, shift gears. Mayor Pete certainly did over into the more moderate camp. But instead, like you said, she's beating up on the easiest person on stage to beat up on, but not actually doing anything that is going to necessarily further her in Nevada and then in South Carolina. She did, though, I thought, had the strongest debate of anyone on stage.
She had an incredible performance.
If only we had been seeing that throughout the entirety of the process.
And look, let me just say, I thought all of them had their moments. I thought Mayor Pete's comments, we played some of them there, and then in his it's easy to plan an attack line. I think I said this last night. I've prepared some of the lowest regarded debaters in American political history in my career, so I know how hard it is. So let me stipulate, it is hard. But it's to come up with an attack line is one thing. What Mayor Pete seemed to do was he had gamed out the conversation, and I thought what he did to Klobuchar was the most significant blow she suffered since her really strong finish in New Hampshire. I thought what Warren did was, as a performance in a league of its own. But I have to say, I don't think any of us know anymore how voters process any of this.
No, it reminded me of, this is an esoteric reference.
Please, I count on you for this.
Yeah, the French phrase for the way Russian 19th century artillery firing was "tout azimut," and what the translation of that is firing wildly in all directions.
Yeah.
That's sort of what the whole debate was. It was like, yes, I guess there might have been some strategery there, but it was hard to say because it looked like the circular firing squad that you said. I have to say I'm a little bit contrarian on Mayor Bloomberg's performance. I don't think it was as devastating and awful as people think. Now, I personally like a president who doesn't wave his hand wildly and, you know, like a third grader with too much Ritalin. He has a demeanor that is presidential. He's calm. I think that contrasts well with the current occupant of the White House. So I think he will get another shot. But as everybody said here, you know, the moderate lane is a way bigger lane.
Yeah.
Bernie has his faction, and to go back to 2016, I mean, if you had to do it all over again, you would say, let's consolidate everybody else but Donald Trump, because Donald Trump would lose to every one of those other Republicans. Bernie could lose to any of the other people on that stage.
If they became the nominee.
And of course, it felt premature for Mike to say, which he did during the day, I think, all of the moderates should drop out of the race except for me. But if you were the head of the DNC and you actually had some power, you'd say, well, you know, that's the way to do it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.